Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. With the Arab world facing unprecedented turmoil, the tiny Gulf nation of Bahrain was not exempt. Since February, hundreds of thousands of the country's Shia-led opposition have been calling for greater rights and freedoms in the Sunni monarchy. As well, the stakes were raised when the ruling Al Khalifa family invited in some 1,500 Saudi and Emirati troops to help restore order. At least 30 people have been killed since the protests began, with hundreds of others being detained since martial law was declared to quash dissent. And in the last week, a military court in the country sentenced 4 Shia protesters to death over the killing of 2 policemen during those protests. Joining me in the studio is the country's Social Development Minister, Dr. Fatima Al-Balushi, who's also, as part of her cabinet responsibilities, in charge of human rights. Dr. Al-Balushi, thank you so much for joining us. Let me start by asking you, what is the situation in Bahrain at the moment?
Let me just go back to the introduction that you gave and some of the information that was, unfortunately, that has been, given out and broadcasted. Let me say that hundreds of thousands of Shia-led protesters did, protest. At the same time, there were hundreds of thousands of Sunni and expats in Bahrain, even they were more like 400,000, came out, said that we want to have dialogue, we don't want any protest in Bahrain. Let's sit down and dialogue. It's not a Shia country, it's not a Sunni country, it's a country for everyone. So this is the first thing that it was protesters were leading one thing, and the rest of the nation was also going out and asking that this is not your country too, it's our country, and our voice has to be heard. The other thing is that the number of dead people, we were, since the beginning in mid of February until mid of March, as you said, around 30 people have been killed, but only half of them were from the protesters and half of them were from police officers and from expats who have been killed by the protesters themselves. So there is also, the number has to be declared, which has to be kind of classified. The other thing is that the troops that came in, they are not just Saudi or from the Emirates. They are called Al Jazeera Shield. Bahrain is a country that's part of the GCC Cooperation Council, and the Al Jazeera Shield is meant as forces to keep peace and security for all the countries, and any country that needs one, it will go. It went to Kuwait at the time it was invaded by Iraq, and now it came to Bahrain because it was seen that the demonstration, that although it started with legitimate rights, with legitimate demands, and everyone accepted it and wanted to sit and have a national dialogue, and the country said yes, and the leader said yes, there is no ceiling for it, no red lines for it, you can sit and put your demands and we'll work. But unfortunately, this demonstration has been hijacked by extremists and has been also instigated by foreign countries. And once
who are those foreign countries?
Those will be declared very clearly by...
are you talking about Iran?
I'm saying neighboring countries. And the government will declare this very clearly in the next few weeks because it's a part of investigations and collecting evidence. But the thing is, GCC countries came in, Al Jazeera Shield came in to make sure, because the stability and peace of one of its members, which is Bahrain, is being, as I said, instigated by foreign countries. It's not just one, it's more than one. And the other thing is that they did not deal at all with the people inside Bahrain. They came mainly also to protect vital areas like the oil refinery, like electricity plants, because those are vital things for any nation. But all the protesters have only been dealt by security forces of the Ministry of Interior in Bahrain.
Minister, if I can just talk about what actually happened during those clashes, because there were some horrific reports that were coming out about casualties being suffered by protesters as they were being brought into hospitals. What is the government's response to those claims?
Our response was, okay, we need numbers. And the casualties that, of course, there are lots of propaganda that happened. By saying,
are you saying they didn't happen at all, or that
there were the casualties? I mentioned the numbers, which is this is the total death toll. But the injured people, what we have is around. It did not even exceed 100. The rest were all very minor injuries that come in after 1 hour. They have been and some of them were overly exaggerated. And it was part of the propaganda that was played by even certain, for example, Al-Alam and Al-Manar stations, where they were actually stationed there, and some of them were really orchestrated. It doesn't mean that this is something that we always, we deal with real, we'd rather deal with real and genuine demands, not demands that are being instigated by others or being orchestrated or being. Bahrain, it's not a country that is new to democracy. Bahrain has started its own democratic process for Sunni and Shia, and we have also Jewish people, we have Christians, or we have expats from different countries. Bahrain wanted to be a country that offers peace and harmony among its people.
Dr. Abelishi, let me just come back to a question though, but what we're hearing in regards to, ever since martial law has been declared, that human rights groups have accused your government of a brutal crackdown, which includes the detention of numerous Shia professionals, such as doctors and lawyers, including a lawyer who was about to defend some of those 7 opposition supporters in the military court, 4 of which were then sentenced to death. Is such a tough response necessary?
Let me say one thing. Of course, there has been murders, there has been crimes that happened, and the government needed to capture the people who did those crimes. It did detain lots of people, but just a few days ago, half of those, it was around 600 that has been detained. Just the past few days, around 350 have been released. And the other 300 are also being, their cases are being.
Do you think that such a tough response is inevitably going to result, though, in further violence?
But if you're, if you are talking about crimes that happened, and some of them were horrific crimes, there has to be investigations. There has to be a way of practicing law and to bring those people to justice. And what you have mentioned, that the military law or the military court, I want to clarify this. It's not a military court, because the state of national safety means that our courts are still going on. There is a collaboration between our courts and the military courts, but the courts that are seeing those cases right now that have been, who have committed crimes and did, things that against the ethics, against the, especially things that has been, some of the doctors even made some surgeries, unnecessary surgeries that ended up resulted some demonstrators being dead. We had 2 being dead because of unnecessary surgeries that happened to them. So now the country, this court, it's a special court in collaboration between both our civil courts and the military courts.
Can I talk specifically about the trial and the finding in regards to those 4 Shia protesters? Germany has apparently called on your government not to go ahead and execute. How do you feel, given that you're in charge of human rights, that there is a court in your country which has declared that those 4 should be condemned to death?
Now it's a bit too early to talk about it, because now, although the judgment has been set, and it shows the independence of that court also, because the general attorney asked for all 7 to be sentenced to death, but the judge found that only 4. But this is only the first ruling. They can appeal And this is, still there's the appeal period. And after the appeal and after the revision of the court ruling, then there will be the final appeal. And until that, of course, Bahrain has always been a country that abides by human rights and abides by the rights and the freedom of speech. But those cases were related to criminal acts and horrific criminal acts where police officers they had been run over by a car back and forth, killing that dead person once and twice and 3 times. It was a very horrific thing, something that has been seen by all of the nation because it was posted over the YouTube and everyone, and there are also other witnesses for that. So still, it's too early to judge and still too early for me even to comment on this. It's still, they can appeal, and this judgment is not taking forward until the appeal period would end.
Dr. Al-Baluchi, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you. That's it for this edition of the Frans van Kat interview. Stay tuned for more news and headlines coming up shortly.